Well, obviously, Jay Leno was called on by the defense to help portray this boy and his family as money-hungry scammers. Was he effective?
No, I don't think he gave Tom Mesereau what he wanted. He did not say that they were after money. He said he spoke to the kid. He sounded very groggy on the phone, talked to Mom. He thought it was the mother and the brother, and nobody asked for a thing.
There has been a major development in the Michael Jackson trial. For more, we go to MSNBC's Jennifer London out in California. Jennifer.
Hi, Allison. Well, I can tell you that after nearly 4 weeks, the defense in Michael Jackson's child molestation trial has rested its case. This happened just moments ago. The defense's final witness, actor Chris Tucker, he first began testifying late yesterday afternoon and was the last witness to take the stand today. And Tucker described his relationship with the accuser and his family. He said more than once the accuser asked him for money, and Tucker said the more time he spent with the accuser and his family, he became more suspicious of them. And at one point, Tucker said he even warned Michael Jackson about the accuser and his family. This was the defense's final push to try and convince this jury of their theory that the accuser and his family are practiced in the art of deception and they would latch onto celebrities in an effort to get their money. And what is happening right now, Allison, the prosecution has begun putting on its rebuttal case. We are told they will call 4 to 6 witnesses, and their first witness has taken the stand, and he is an investigator with the district attorney's office. Allison, now back to you.
And Jennifer, 2 quick questions. When do you expect that the jury will get this case?
Well, that really depends on a couple of things, Allison. One, how long will the rebuttal case go? Again, we're being told it will be short, 4 to 6 witnesses. Then the defense has an opportunity to put on what's called a surrebuttal. We are also told that won't be too long as well. Then there's some legal housekeeping that needs to be done. They need to decide on jury instructions, and then the attorneys need some time to work on their closing arguments. Allison, with all that being said, it is possible the jury could begin deliberating Michael Jackson's fate as early as next week.
So likely after Memorial Day. Jennifer London, thank you so much for all that information.
Your Honor, the defense rests. With those words, Michael Jackson's attorney ended the case in chief without calling Michael Jackson to testify. 50 witnesses over 15 days testified in Jackson's defense. Some suggested he's the victim in the case. Others defended Jackson's practice of sharing his bed with boys. Still others, like the final defense witness, actor Chris Tucker, attacked the credibility of the accuser and his family. NBC's Mike Taibbi in court once again from the beginning. So, Mike, let me start first, before we get into the details of testimony today, overview of the defense case. Based on what we expected, how would you compare what they presented in the defense case versus what we expected?
Not so much what we expected as what Tom Mesereau, the chief defense attorney, promised in his opening statement. And we all, trial watchers, always do go back to the opening statement and then do the simple math. And the simple math says that there are some promises, some key promises Tom Mesereau made that were not kept. He said, for example, listing a number of celebrities, that this was a family, the accuser's family, who went and asked them for money. And as we saw with Jay Leno yesterday, Jay Leno testified that he was never asked for money or for anything. He did tell the police he thought they were out for money, but that's something different than actually getting testimony that they asked for money and they got it. What we did find, and what Mesereau was able to accomplish through his 50 witnesses, was a very clear and specific picture, true or untrue, of a family who performed like scammers, like people who are out for the gold, either subtly or not so subtly. For example, we had Chris Tucker.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, Mike, that I think Chris Tucker may have been the best witness in that regard. Maybe he had that paralegal who was also powerful, but Chris Tucker basically delivered everything the defense needed.
Sure, and he did it using buzzwords. Interesting use of language. I'm a real fan of language, as you know, Dan, and I wrote down some of the words that he used. He used possessed to describe the mother of the accuser. Not just that she was mentally unstable in his words, but that she was possessed, chaotic. He talked about his girlfriend, former girlfriend, getting tangled up with this family. He talked about the accuser himself being cunning, smart and cunning. Quoted him as saying, the boy coming up to him saying, listen, I want that, let me have that, I'm not feeling good, taking advantage of his illness again and again, until, as Chris Tucker testified, he began to get suspicious, nervous, scared. His own self-descriptions came to believe that they were out for money. In fact, he had sent them a lot of money, wired the money, and was prepared to give them a car, and hauled all that back, eased out of it, he said, asked his then-girlfriend to ease out of it, back away from this family, told Michael Jackson to do the same thing. So if the jury latches onto those buzzwords, as I think a lot of people in the courtroom did, that's the picture they're going to be left with.
Let me just read the
Not that they all came and said...
Let me just read the quotes from the stuff you were just talking about. Chris Tucker, he was referring to the accuser in this case. This is not the mother. He was really smart, and he was cunning. But at the time, I always overlooked it. And his brother was definitely cunning. Remember, they are the two most important witnesses for the prosecution. He was always saying stuff like, Chris, let me have this, let me have that. Come on, I'm not feeling too good. Of course, referring to his cancer. And Tucker talked about the fact that he gave the family some money and that they just kept asking for more and more in that regard. Mike, the prosecution then immediately began its rebuttal case, meaning prosecutors get an opportunity to respond to the defense's case. Any headlines out of that?
Well, I think a couple of good things for the prosecution and some more that we can expect from them. For example, they had Jesus Salas come on, who was the house manager at Neverland, and he testified extensively to basically rebut some of the specific testimony about whether he had ever had money stolen by the accuser's kid brother or by the accuser himself, whether there were some other things that happened. But more importantly, I think, this is my view of it, he gave testimony that could not be challenged and was not challenged, that Michael Jackson was drunk frequently, as much as 4 times a week. And I always thought that booze stuff was important. Yeah. And Mesereau didn't challenge it in any way except to say, but didn't he always have his nanny with him? Wasn't the nanny always around for his kids? And I got to say, and I've said this before, I think that when the jury, any juror who has experience with alcoholism, who thinks that alcohol is an issue in this case, even though being a drunk is not what he's charged.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Booze.
It's a good point.
Right.
And real quick, Mike,
I think it's an issue.
Mike, you're still going to be walking your dog 2 weeks from yesterday back at home?
Well, I promised him I would, and unlike Tom Mesereau, I keep my promises at the end of the day. So my dog expects that I'll be back walking him in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I think you may have a lonely dog, but we'll see. I think this may go longer than that with the deliberations, etc. We shall see. Mike Taibbi, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Joining me now, an all-star panel. Outside the Santa Maria Courthouse, MSNBC analyst, former prosecutor Susan Filan, criminal defense attorney Daniel Horowitz, attorney and Inside Edition senior correspondent Jim Murray, and the former Santa Barbara sheriff Jim Thomas, who is also now an NBC News analyst. All right, Jim Murray, you've been sitting in court every day. I saw you there at the opening statements. Overview, defense case, it's done. Did they deliver?
Yes and no. And, I think the case really went south from the beginning when they brought in these 2 boys, Wade Robson and Brett Barnes, who had spent a lot of time with Michael Jackson, and then their moms and sisters. I found that very disturbing testimony because it really helped buttress the prosecution's case. But after that, Mike Taibbi's right. They really focused in on attacking the credibility of the boy and attacking the credibility of his mom. And, when Mike was talking about this being intoxicated, it was even more than that on this prosecution rebuttal, because this witness, Jesus Salas, said that the accuser and his brother spent 90% of the nights between February and March of 2003 in Michael Jackson's room. So if he's intoxicated 4 out of 7 nights, then 50% of the time that he's with those kids, he's intoxicated. I thought that was really big.
Daniel, I think that's big too. I mean, look, he's not on trial for being boozed up. But that's not the question. The question is whether jurors are going to say to themselves, if Michael Jackson is boozed up 4 out of 7 nights in the week, well, you know what? Then maybe he was doing things that even he wouldn't approve of.
Dan, I agree. That really was snuck in by the prosecution. It didn't come in their case in chief. It didn't come in really in response to anything that the defense put out there. It just all of a sudden raised its head during what was supposed to be rebuttal to the defense case. And I think Tom Mesereau was caught unawares. For one thing, he never said, what do you mean by intoxicated? 2 drinks, 3 drinks, drunk so he can't stand. We never got there, and I think Tom was being careful because this came out of left field. Let's see how they deal with it when they come back in their rebuttal to the prosecution's rebuttal. They may deal with that a little bit.
Maybe. I don't know. I'll be interested. But look, Susan, you've been out there for a couple weeks now. You heard the end of the defense case. Now you're hearing this rebuttal. Are you thinking, again, at the end, as we look at this case sort of in the macro picture, that you'd be worried if you were the prosecutor?
I would be worried if I were the prosecutor, because this is a credibility case, and what the prosecution had to prove is based on the testimony of the boy and the witness brother and the mother. Now that they've been so thoroughly attacked by the defense's case, not just on cross-exam, and they were attacked on cross-exam, but they've been now attacked through independent and separate witnesses. I suppose the paralegal probably being the most devastating one, and secondly, the lawyer for the mother in the JCPenney lawsuit, who said in the middle of her deposition, all of a sudden, out of left field, she starts adding that she was fondled, and that the mother let her kids take acting classes so she could coach them through their various testimonies and depositions. That just really laid a glove on the prosecution's case. But here's the bottom line for me. This guy sleeps in bed, by his own admission, with little boys. And if the jury's going to have to excuse that behavior because they've now entered his never world of an alternate reality that is really kind of hard to buy into, I think that's where we're going to have a hung jury. The prosecution may not have proved it, but even though it's not the defense's job to disprove it, they didn't do enough with raising reasonable doubt on the molestation. I think they nuked the conspiracy.
Yeah.
But molestation just hangs in the balance.
Jim,
and
look,
with the prior bad act evidence,
yeah,
I think
all
they're
right.
going to have a hard time letting him walk out the door.
Tom Sneddon is an old friend of yours, and I know you haven't been speaking to him about the case as it's been ongoing. But you know him, and you worked with him for a long time, and you've watched this case pretty closely. You think he's really sitting there saying things just are going peachy keen?
Well, I think they believe it is in one aspect. I think the defense has been very effective in destroying the mother's credibility. But remember, Dan, the mother did not testify to the issue of the molestation. The boy did. And I think his credibility is still pretty good with this jury. In fact, they're talking about showing a 2.5-hour film of his testimony to the law enforcement officers when they first did his first interview. That could be very, very powerful. I think that the issues of the molestation are still problematic for the Jackson team.
And that's a real good point that Jim's bringing up. There's still a battle going on as to whether the prosecution will be able to show a videotape of the boy being questioned by the authorities to say, look, you think it was scripted? Well, look at the way he was answering the questions back then.